I had always thought that being a mother and grandmother was the most important role I would ever play in my life. And for years, I had dedicated myself fully to it. My son, Daniel, and his wife, Emily, meant the world to me. I had watched them grow into the people they were, nurturing and supporting them every step of the way. The love I had for my family was limitless, and it had always been my greatest joy to see them happy. When my grandson, Luke, was born, I thought my heart couldn't expand any further. There was something so pure, so beautiful about holding him in my arms for the first time, watching his tiny hands grasp mine as if they knew I was his protector. I had always imagined being there for every important milestone in his life, just as I had been for Daniel's. I had dreams of seeing Luke marry, of holding him close as he started his own family, passing down all the love and wisdom I had learned throughout my life. Over the years, Luke and I formed a bond that I cherished deeply. I attended every soccer game, every school play, every birthday party. I was there for him through the awkward teenage years, offering advice when he needed it, and encouragement when he doubted himself. Being a grandmother was a gift that I didn't take lightly. I felt that I was involved in his life in the way that mattered most by showing up, by being present, by giving him my love, time, and attention. And when Luke told us he was getting married, it felt like the culmination of all those years of support. My heart swelled with pride as I imagined the day he would marry the woman of his dreams. The idea of him starting his own family, of watching him experience the same joy that I had experienced raising him, was something I had always dreamed of. I had been there for every part of his life so far, and I fully expected to be there when he married. When Daniel and Emily first mentioned the wedding, I was beyond thrilled. Luke had met a lovely young woman named Lily, and it seemed like the two of them were meant to be. They were planning a big celebration, an event to bring together everyone who had supported them throughout their relationship. I could see it clearly in my mind. A beautiful venue, my son and his family proudly standing together with Lily's family, celebrating the love between Luke and Lily. "You're going to be there, right, Mum?" Daniel had asked me during one of our early conversations about the wedding. I could hear the excitement in his voice, and it made my heart flutter. "We're planning a big day, and we wouldn't dream of having it without you." Of course I would be there. I was his mother, after all, and being there for his son's wedding felt like the most natural thing in the world. I had helped raise Daniel, guided him through the tough parts of life, and there was no way I was going to miss seeing my grandson take this huge step. The weeks passed in a flurry of wedding plans. I helped out wherever I could, offering suggestions for the decorations, suggesting a few vendors for the catering and flowers. I felt proud to be a part of it all, knowing how much my experience and input meant to them. I could see Luke's happiness when he spoke about Lily, and I was thrilled that he had found someone who made him so happy. I wanted to be involved. I wanted to share in their joy, just as I had always shared in the milestones of their lives. But as the weeks went by, I noticed something strange. The closer the wedding date came, the less involved I felt. The excitement that had been there in the beginning seemed to fade away, and I found myself standing on the sidelines. I never received the invitation, despite all my efforts to stay involved. I thought it was a mistake at first. Maybe the invitation had simply gotten lost in the mail, or they were still finalizing the guest list. So I called Daniel. I wanted to know the details. What time should I arrive? What I should wear? And who else would be there? He answered the phone casually, but there was an odd detachment in his voice that I couldn't quite place. "Oh, don't worry, Mom," he said, dismissively. "We'll send out the invitations soon. I'll let you know the details. We're just finalizing a few things." I didn't think much of it at first, but after a few days passed and I still hadn't received anything, I started to get nervous. I called again, this time a little more insistent. I couldn't just let it go. This was too important to me. Daniel, I really need to know about the wedding. It's right around the corner, and I still haven't received anything. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Daniel finally replied, his tone noticeably colder than before. We'll get it to you, Mom. We're just really busy with the planning, okay? Something in his voice made my stomach tighten. Why was he avoiding my questions? Why didn't he want to give me the details? I tried to ignore the pit in my stomach, telling myself that I was overreacting. Surely everything would be fine. But as the days went on, it became clear that I was being left out. I wasn't included in any of the conversations about the ceremony, the reception, or even the guest list. I wasn't part of the planning process like I had been for his wedding or for the other big events in our family. The truth became impossible to ignore. I wasn't going to be invited. It wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. I was being excluded from my grandson's wedding. And what hurt the most was that it was happening quietly, without any explanation or discussion. It was as if I no longer mattered. Couldn't believe it. I had spent my entire life showing up for them, offering unconditional love and support. I had been the one who was always there, the one they could turn to. And now, suddenly, I wasn't even worthy of an invitation to such an important event in their lives. But the worst part wasn't just the exclusion. It was the silence. Daniel hadn't called to explain why I wasn't invited. He hadn't called to apologize. He hadn't even reached out to tell me what was going on. He just left me in the dark, alone with my hurt and confusion. The son I had loved so dearly, the one I had raised with all my heart, was turning away from me without explanation, without a second thought. I couldn't stop asking myself what I had done wrong. Had I overstepped my bounds? Had I been too involved in their lives? Had I, without realizing it, become a burden to them? The questions tormented me. The silence felt deafening. Finally, after days of agonizing uncertainty, I received a message. From Emily. It was short and to the point, with no empathy, no concern for how I might feel. Hi, just wanted to let you know that we've decided to keep the wedding small, and we're limiting the guest list to immediate family and a few friends. We hope you understand. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Immediate family. I wasn't part of that anymore. I had been erased from the most important moment in Luke's life. My heart shattered. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to cry. Instead, I felt a deep, gnawing emptiness. The kind of sadness that comes from a deep betrayal, one that isn't just about the absence of an invitation, but about the absence of love and respect. The days following the heart-wrenching phone call and Emily's cold text were some of the longest and most agonizing of my life. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in some sort of nightmare, where nothing made sense anymore. The sting of being excluded from my grandson's wedding, after all the love and care I had poured into my family over the years, left me emotionally paralyzed. The silence from Daniel and Emily only deepened the wound. Each day felt like a slow unraveling of the world I thought I knew. I found myself waking up in the early hours of the morning, unable to sleep, my mind racing. How had we gotten here? I kept asking myself the same question over and over. The feelings of betrayal were so raw, so sharp, that I could hardly breathe. How could my son, my flesh and blood, treat me like this? How could they both, together, make a decision to leave me out of such an important moment in my life? I knew that I had to get a hold of myself. I couldn't let the hurt consume me. But every time I tried to distract myself, every time I tried to focus on something else, my thoughts would return to the same painful truth. I wasn't invited. The finality of it echoed in my mind like a loud, unanswered question. What had I done wrong? I had been there for Daniel and Emily from the beginning. I had supported them through every challenge, every decision. When Daniel was struggling to make ends meet, I had stepped in to help. When Emily's family had been distant, I had welcomed her with open arms, treating her like my own daughter. I had attended their wedding, celebrated their milestones, and cheered on every success. I had always been there for them, and yet, this exclusion felt like the ultimate betrayal. Days turned into weeks, and I tried everything to make sense of it. I reached out to family members, hoping someone would offer an explanation, someone who could shed light on what was happening. I tried speaking to my sisters, who had always been my closest confidants, but their responses were just as cold as Danielle's. They didn't understand either. They all assumed that I should just let it go, that it was just a wedding, and that I should be the bigger person. But how could I? How could I just pretend that everything was fine when I had been deliberately excluded from one of the most important events in my family's life? No one seemed to understand the depth of the hurt I was feeling. No one seemed to grasp the emotional devastation that came with being cast aside by the very people I had loved and nurtured for so long. I tried to keep my mind occupied with mundane tasks, work, household chores, small errands, but everything felt hollow. My heart felt empty, and the pain of being disregarded gnawed at me day and night. I would find myself staring out of the window, lost in thought, wondering what had happened to the family I once knew. Had I done something wrong? Had I pushed them away? The questions haunted me. The worst part was the constant silence from Daniel. I couldn't understand why he wasn't reaching out, why he wasn't trying to fix what had clearly been broken. Why wasn't he apologizing? Why wasn't he explaining himself? I had always been there for him. As his mother, I had done everything I could to help him grow, to guide him, to support him when no one else could. How could he just cut me off like this, without any explanation? The silence felt like a death sentence to our relationship. As the days dragged on, I started to feel like I had no place in their lives anymore. It wasn't just the wedding. It was everything: the slow withdrawal, the growing distance. I was the one who had spent years loving and supporting them, and now it felt as if they had moved on, leaving me in the dust. I wasn't even important enough to be included in a celebration of love, something that should have been about family above all else. I spent many long nights lying awake, trying to make sense of the decisions they had made. I thought back to every interaction, every conversation, wondering where things had gone wrong. Had I been too much? Had I not respected their space enough? Was I too involved? These thoughts consumed me, but no matter how hard I tried to find an answer, the truth eluded me. I began to realize that this wasn't about me, not truly. It wasn't about something I had done or failed to do. It was about their choices that left me out of the picture. It was about the way they had decided that their life was better off without me in it, at least for this one pivotal moment. And that realization was devastating. But as much as the pain hurt, something else started to take root in me, a quiet, whispering voice, barely audible but insistent. You cannot let this break you. In the midst of my sorrow, I realized something important. I had spent so much of my life caring for others, putting everyone's needs ahead of mine, that I had lost sight of who I was. I had forgotten that I needed to take care of myself too. I had been defined by my role as a mother and grandmother. But now, I was being forced to face the fact that I had to find my own identity again. I had to stop being a shadow in their lives and reclaim the person I was before the roles of mother and grandmother had consumed me. So I decided to take a step back from the hurt and focus on myself. I had always loved painting. But I hadn't touched a canvas in years. I had let it go, just as I had let so many other parts of myself slip away. I found an art class nearby, signed up, and began to spend time rediscovering my love for creative expression. I had forgotten how cathartic it was to lose myself in a brushstroke, to pour my emotions onto a blank canvas without the need for words. It was therapeutic, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a small spark of joy return. I also decided to reconnect with friends I hadn't seen in ages, friends who hadn't been caught up in the whirlwind of my family's dynamics. I started to make time for things I had always loved: taking long walks, reading novels I had set aside, attending local cultural events. It was a slow process, but I was beginning to realize that I wasn't defined by what others chose to do or not do to me. I was still me, and I was worthy of happiness, even if it didn't come from the people I had expected. But still, the sadness lingered. The truth remained. Daniel and Emily had made a decision that left me out, and I didn't know how to move forward with that. I was hurting, yes, but the pain of being excluded from the wedding also sparked something else, an understanding that I had to take control of my own life, regardless of their choices. I couldn't let my worth be tied to their actions anymore. I had to be my own advocate, my own source of strength. In the quiet moments of reflection, I came to a powerful realization. I could survive this. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be painless. But I had to be strong enough to move forward, with or without them. The first step was acknowledging the pain, feeling it, and letting it pass through me. And then I would focus on building the life I deserved, one that was no longer dependent on their approval, but rooted in my own self-worth. The weeks that followed were a blur of emotions, a combination of sadness, anger, confusion, and, eventually, a growing sense of clarity. The silence from Daniel and Emily remained deafening. I felt invisible, lost in a world where the people I had once believed would always be there for me seemed to have moved on without a second thought. Despite my attempts to reach out, the emotional wall they had put up seemed insurmountable. I tried to keep myself busy immersing myself in painting, reconnecting with old friends, and even starting small projects around the house, but the absence of my family lingered in the background of everything I did. I missed them, yes, but I also felt a deep, gnawing sense of betrayal. How could they simply exclude me from such an important part of their lives? How could my own son, the one I had sacrificed so much for, turn his back on me without explanation? I would spend late nights staring at old family photos, remembering the times when we had shared joy, laughter, and love. The memories felt distant now, as if they belonged to another life, one that had been torn apart by a single decision. The pain of being left out of Luke's wedding was sharp, but it wasn't just about the wedding itself. It was about everything: the years of sacrifice, the love I had given, and the way I had always been there for them, only to be cast aside without a second thought. But one morning, I woke up with a new resolve. I had spent too long wallowing in self-pity, letting my pain define me. I had to take control of my life again. I had been through so much over the years, raising Daniel, supporting him, and even helping him and Emily with their own lives. It was time to stop defining myself through their actions or lack thereof. It was time for me to start living for myself, to reclaim my independence, my joy, and my self-worth. I began by turning inward, rediscovering the things I loved to do. I took long walks in the park, letting the fresh air fill my lungs as I cleared my head. I spent more time with friends, catching up on years of lost connection. I laughed, something I hadn't done in a while, and it felt good. I had forgotten what it was like to enjoy life on my own terms, without feeling like I had to carry the weight of others' expectations on my shoulders. One of the most powerful steps I took was deciding to take a solo trip. I had always wanted to visit the mountains, a place that had always called to me. I had promised myself that one day, when the time was right, I would go. And now, I realized that there was no better time than the present. I needed to reconnect with nature, with myself. I needed to find the peace I had lost in the chaos of my relationships. The trip was everything I had hoped for and more. The mountains were majestic, their peaks reaching toward the sky, as if reminding me that there was so much more to life than the pain I had been carrying. I spent my days hiking through trails, surrounded by the stillness of the forest, breathing in the crisp mountain air. At night, I sat by a fire, gazing at the stars, reflecting on the journey I had been on and the one that was still ahead. During those quiet moments in the mountains, I realized something profound. I had always been enough. I didn't need anyone's approval, not even Daniel's, to validate my worth. I had been giving so much of myself for so long, without asking for anything in return. And while I had been hurt by the exclusion from Luke's wedding, I couldn't let that define who was. I couldn't let their decisions diminish the value I knew I had. The more I reflected, the more I understood that healing wasn't about waiting for others to come around or apologize. It was about accepting what had happened, learning from it, and moving forward. I had to stop relying on external validation for my happiness. I had to stop letting others control my emotions. It was time to take charge of my own life, to create the happiness I deserved. When I returned from my trip, I was different, stronger, more confident in who I was, independent of my family's decisions. I began to make plans for my future that didn't revolve around Daniel, Emily, or Luke. I had spent so many years pouring into them that I had neglected to invest in my own dreams. But now, I was ready to change that. I signed up for art classes, something I had always wanted to pursue, but had set aside for years. I found a local group of like-minded people who shared my passion for painting, and we met every week to share our work, offer advice, and support each other. I took on new projects around the house, ones that I had been putting off, and found satisfaction in the small tasks that I had once thought were insignificant. I even began considering travel more seriously. I had always dreamed of visiting Europe, walking through the streets of Paris, seeing the art in Florence, feeling the history in London. It was something I had always put on hold for later. But now, I realized that later was now. I started planning for the future that was mine to create. One where I was in control, one where I could be happy regardless of what anyone else thought. And then, a few weeks after I returned from my trip, I received a text from Luke. "Grandma, I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened. I'm sorry for how things turned out. I didn't mean to hurt you. I want you to know that you're important to me. I hope we can talk soon." The message wasn't perfect. It wasn't the grand apology I had imagined in my mind, but it was a start. It was a glimmer of hope, a sign that maybe, just maybe, there was room for healing. I didn't respond right away. I needed time to think about what I wanted, what I truly needed from them. I had spent so much time focusing on their needs and their expectations, and now it was time to focus on my own. When I finally did respond, I said, "Thank you, Luke. I appreciate your message. I'm still processing everything, but I hope we can talk soon too." That was the beginning. The first step toward rebuilding. I wasn't sure if things would ever go back to the way they were, or if I even wanted them to. What I did know was that I had changed. I had learned to stand on my own, to take back my power, and to find happiness within myself, regardless of whether or not it came from my family. I had spent so many years living for others, but now I was living for me.